In today's video, we're going to cover something that I've been really interested in and just trying to really wrap my head around. I've tried talking about Web3 and it seems to be gaining a lot more speed and just mindshare in the tech world these days. I recently re-listened to a podcast with Chris, Dixon, and Naval Ravikant on the Tim Ferriss show. If you want to find that conversation, there will be a link for it because it's highly worth listening to, and there are so many links for information that it's just really relevant and will only kind of just place where we're at in the current stage here of Web3 development is really how I see this. It really has all the markers, for me at least, to kind of reshape the internet as we know it. And I know that's a super grandiose statement. And I've always thought that crypto in and of itself and how it's used right now, or how it's hyped up as, is only scratching the surface. So with only scratching the surface and failing to really articulate these ideas well with friends, I've kind of gone back to the drawing board, re-listened to the conversation, done even more exploration in the topics. And now in this video, I want to summarize some of the thoughts that I've had there so that I can help more than just my own friends. I want to help everybody, because I think this is going to be one of those things. It will serve as the foundation for the next 20 years. If my lifetime has been the advent of personal computing and all of this, even the iPhone and all those other things, then what we're seeing right now is that early 1990s era that will pave the way for the next generation. Which, again, super grandiose, but that's where we're at, I think. Let's rewind the clock and talk about what we mean by Web3. And so we have to go all the way back to the beginning. Web3 is really just version 3 of the internet. But first, let's just kind of lay the groundwork. Web 1.0 was roughly from 91 to 2004. It's all just static web pages. The websites would load and display only what was coded there. Just as an easy way to describe it is 1.0 was really just learning to crawl in many respects. It took what was already being done in the physical world, basically asked, how do we represent this in the digital world? And that was really like websites became online brochures for companies. You would have, a menu that would be put online as a text document, or, PDFs and all these other things, Word documents, those kinds of things. Or rather just taking the typewriter and making a word processor. Again, all of these things are not super new. It's just transitioning from one platform to another, from the physical world to the digital world. And it was basically read only from a user's perspective. There was no way for you as the reader to input into Web 1.0. And so that's where Web 2.0 comes in, or Web 2. And that's roughly since 2005, where there is the advent of app-based software. And all of this app-based stuff coincides with the advent of technology like the smartphone or the iPhone. And the really power here is that it created networks that could leverage users. Now, all of a sudden, you have all of the things that we basically take for granted today. I'm going to be uploading this to YouTube. I'm also going to be creating a podcast out of it. So now you have all of these things that people can generate content with technology, and you can now put it out there to the world. And the limitation here is that the ownership still belongs to the app host. So the majority of the benefit here is the places that you post your content. So in this case, it would be the podcast provider, YouTube, Spotify, whatever you name it. And instead of guaranteeing some sort of income or monetization, instead you trade that work for secondary metrics like engagement in the form of plays, likes, follows, subscriptions, etc. We all live and breathe this stuff. We know what that means. And so really the big issue here is that users themselves don't see the value unless they become really large. And so what does Web3 mean for all of this? It's the next iteration again. The core here is that it will all be decentralized. No longer will there be a company middleman making sure that you have acceptable content or skim a portion off the top of transactions. Or really what that means now, instead of having to go through a middleman like a bank or something like Stripe, which is really good for many people to make transactions seamless from peer to peer, instead you can go from peer to peer and it would all just be handled just by how the organization of the code is that allows for transactions to take place. As long as both parties, me and you, agree on the terms of the transaction, then it won't matter. And so for that reason, this is the reason cryptocurrency is tied to Web3, is that due to that, almost all of these new applications run on some sort of blockchain methodology. And the blockchain here is that it basically just allows these new internet native apps, meaning that you wouldn't need to use an external currency like USD to make a transaction happen. There would be some agreed upon token and rate that would allow for the transactions to take place. And so what I just did there was just a super quick summary of what's going on. I don't expect all of you to understand that. I just wanted to kind of lay that out there just so that we're all kind of talking about the same thing, because sometimes these things are so complicated and so abstract that people get lost. And I probably even went too fast here. So with that, I found more links that were from the podcast. I read those, and I'm going to share those in the description so people can go find them and explore, because that's just what we got to do. We just got to do brute force. You got to study. You got to do the research, and it doesn't hurt to just be a fly on the wall for these things. And that's kind of why I'm doing this, because it's forcing me to learn. It's forcing myself to learn how to articulate these really abstracted things that almost all of us don't get. So my parents are not very tech people, and I've had to learn all about tech and to setting up even what I'm doing right here by myself. I didn't have, someone guiding me through that process. And so right now what I'm seeing Web3 is like, is that's what it's going to be like for us in the future. If you don't start early, you'll feel like you're left behind. Even talking about the metaverse stuff, which is separate from what I'm talking about right here, but that is where this is kind of heading. So that was a little bit of a tangent, but we're going to get back to the rest of what I had to talk about here. So the next topic that I kind of want to touch on is called generative art. It was mentioned in the episode, and it's kind of, there's two versions of this that you can use it kind of interchangeably, which is algorithmic art or generative art. They cited the work of Tyler Hobbs or Fidenza as an example. I find this intersection of code and art to be really interesting. It's now that coding is entering in this more mature realm in which it's kind of like a raw material that can express itself based on the creator defines it, right? It's the same way an artist can use a skill to create an image using pigment and paint, or a sculptor molds clay or marble. Now all of a sudden you have this new version of art that allows people to do things that even the artist wasn't expecting initially, because they can kind of create an algorithm and they can just kind of change some of the parameters of how it expresses itself, and all of a sudden it's different, or it's not exactly the same. I know many people might look at digital art and have some sort of reaction of whether or not they call it art, but that's not the point. The point is that I think the bigger piece is that the tools for creating art, or just creating in general, is expanding even further into the digital realm. And if the metaverse idea is truly coming, the experience of humans is going to fork. And what I mean is fork is a coding term, because you can take code and you just recycle it. So you fork your code and then you just make your own little changes to it. And I kind of see that right now we have the physical world, which is kind of this interaction we have here. But if the metaverse idea with all this Web3 stuff, we'll have two separate existences. One where we live in the digital world, and one that is still purely physical. And how those merge together is yet to be seen. I can almost see that the metaverse world could almost be entirely separate from the physical world in some sense. Or you'll see people who become experts in the metaverse world, whatever that means, and experts in the physical world, and you'll have almost two separate parallel lives happening if you so choose. Again, nothing is set in stone here, but that's what it feels like it might be happening. I've already mentioned NFTs, and I'll kind of go into it a little bit here. And I'm not going to go into the trading aspects of the NFT, which is really popular right now and continues to be popular. I'll have some basic logic there, but I'm not your person to ask about that. It's more of like, if that's your jam, I would love to know what your resources are if you are playing with that space. But otherwise, I don't have any dogs in that race. So just for those who don't know, an NFT is a non-fungible token, and it's still expanding in popularity, but the utility of them is not clear. And one of the coolest uses or the ideas that I've seen put forward is from Sam Harris on NFTs. He's a proponent of giving what you can pledge, and it's a commitment to basically giving a portion of your income to the world's most effective charities. And basically through his Waking Up app, or I believe, yeah, I think it would be Waking Up, I can't remember now, but through his, if you took the pledge and you were with his organization, he would basically reserve an NFT for you and say, because you've taken that pledge, you get this NFT. And then he wants to go to, some big organizations like the premium credit cards, usually reserved for ultra wealthy, or season tickets for the NFL or NBA or something like that, that is usually reserved for people with other status markers. And he would hope that by saying, hey, I have a certain subsection of people, 1,000 people that have committed to making this pledge, wouldn't those companies want to associate themselves with someone who's, putting a portion of their income, and it's not an insignificant amount, right? So no matter at what level of wealth you have, 10% or whatever percentage that is the bar here is a big number, right? And almost saying too that a 10% pledge for someone who only makes 70,000 is something that is even more impactful for that person's quality of life than, say, someone who has 2 million net wealth or something like that. So it's really cool, and I really like this idea because it would be a win-win for everyone involved. The company that chooses to give these benefits to people would then hopefully pushing more people to make that kind of decision, right? And then the last part here is just more of some general idea I have about NFTs and really just kind of stock stuff in general. If you decide to jump into NFTs, the big thing is, since it's so early and so volatile, is that you really want to be a part of that community, and that you're not looking at it as some sort of, cash grab to buy something. It gets really big and hot, and then you flip, and then you get out. Because right now, I don't know if that's, it could be possible, but it's just not the safe bet, because you have to go into this stuff assuming you're going to lose all of it. Just as an example for me is if one of my favorite bands or something like that came out with an NFT, I'd likely purchase that. Because for me, I'm supporting the creators I really care about to do more of the thing that they already love, especially considering that live shows and things like that are not as likely. So this is my way of paying it forward to them so that they can continue to do what they want to do. And I just find that to be really interesting. And this NFT space is so early on. I don't even know where it's going to go in the future, because there's just so much you can do with it. And right now, the trading collectible aspect is like version not even 1.0. We're like, we're basically, even if we're talking baseball terms, we are barely even off of home plate. We're going to close this up before it gets any longer than it already is. Like I've said many times, these ideas are incredibly experimental and being refined in real time. And like I said, I'm not really the cutting edge here, but I'm trying to follow the people who are. And I'm just curious. This is my way of trying to pitch it to the audience to provide some sense making, but also I'm really hoping that you guys come back and tell me where I should look at, because what have you been exposed to and found interesting? The world is heading to something that is portrayed in the film Ready Player One. In the podcast, Tim also mentioned Snow Crash as another source of inspiration or similarity here, but hopefully not dystopian, right? But overall, I think right now we're in the early garage stage that so many of these big tech companies were once in. The most innovative ideas typically come from the nerds. It's these people who just are in their free time because they just are obsessed with these ideas, that they just do whatever they need to do to make it real. I'll close with a couple quotes that just kind of has stuck with me with everything that's going on here. And the first one is from Chris. What the smartest people do on the weekends is what everyone else will do during the week in 10 years. And the next one from Naval is denying and pushing back against NFTs and crypto is basically saying we're not going to have a collectively owned future, we're going to have a corporate owned future, and we're going to have a government owned future. And I think both of these are really just important to think about, right? Because the second one is more crypto space and all this tech stuff, but the first one, I think that one applies in any domain. So we'll leave it at that one. This is the Wonders of Web3. It's all decentralizing the current internet. And I think I have another video coming up, or an idea for a video coming up that I think really encapsulates why I find this so exciting. And it really comes down to, reshuffling the deck from a creative or creator standpoint. I think we'll leave it there because there's a lot to talk about here, and I'm just curious to see what others think.